observing the comparisons, in observing a comparison between what you did and what the defense submitted, to the naked eye watching them, can you tell them apart?
Well, you'd have to preface that because the one that you can't tell apart, I was mentioning earlier, is where the taser is shown moving away from Mr. Slager. Okay? That's a very small piece of time, and that one you can compare side by side without an issue.
And after you completed your stabilization and enhancement of the video segments, did you also go back to the raw, unenhanced video to see if, on closer inspection, you could find some of the characteristics that were in your enhancements?
Oh, absolutely. I can take that same taser movement and with the right player, I can find every frame and pull it down, and you can see the same thing frame by frame. They're just not on top of each other.
And the enhancement simply makes it a little easier to see.
On this one, the only enhancement done on the clip we're talking about is stabilization, and it absolutely makes it easier to see.
But it's still there in the original.
It is.
Okay. I believe the analogy we used in talking was like the difference in me trying to read this document with no glasses versus reading glasses.
Well, I wouldn't use that for stabilization. It would be that you're able to grab that person's hand and hold it still, a little stiller, not necessarily perfectly still. That would be a better analogy for stabilization.
Okay. But for enhancement, the glasses analysis works.
Yes, absolutely.
Makes it a little clearer, even though if you work and strain hard enough in the original unenhanced, you can find it.
Yes,
You can find the phone in Walter Scott's hand
in the unenhanced you can.
with unenhanced. And again, you have seen the defense product of their enhancement of the phone in hand,
Yes.
and it looks similar to yours.
Yeah, you've got a little different format. They've got the in-car here, and they've got their stabilized going here, and then it blends over. But if you look at just that part, yes, it's there.
And again, this is not your first time using Synthize and the other programs other than Akina.
Right.
And because it was your first time using Akina, you compared it to the other programs to see if it was altering.
Not only that, as I explained, the software's features that you can pull a slider across and you're going from original to your enhancement, back and forth, and you can see what's taking place, if anything.
Whether or not you're an expert, you can see that change.
Absolutely.
A layperson can see that change.
Well, it was brought up earlier during my cross, I guess you'd call it, that, it's supposed to be a one-button software. Well, it's not quite that far, but with that feature there, it is heads above the rest I've used.
Now, with regards to photogrammetry, that is something that has been around since the dawn of photography.
Yes.
And it is simply taking a photograph and trying to take measurements from it.
Yes.
And you've been doing that for how long?
Well, we've been using different types of photogrammetry for probably close to a decade or so.
Okay. And regarding, Mr. McCune asked you about your measurements and offering an opinion. Taking a tape measure and pulling it out, measuring between 2 points and stating what the measurement is not an expert opinion, is it?
Not that, no.
Okay. And if you take measuring tape from one point to another point and seeing where they intersect and determining the number that's on there, that's not an expert opinion. You don't have to be an expert to do that.
No.
But those are some of the tools that you use in recreating the scene.
Yes.
And also in recreating the scene, you use the photographs that SLED has introduced.
Yes, we did. And the coroners and the North Charleston police, yes.
And then the video itself.
Absolutely.
And again, in doing your recreation of the scene work, other than the photograph photographs, the video, you went out to the scene itself?
3 times.
Okay. And you were able to make identifications out of the scene to things on the video and things in the photographs?
Yes.
To determine their accuracy?
Yes, and also where they fit in the timeline, so to speak, yes.
Okay. And those are things that anyone, if pointed in the right direction, can see similarities and differences in.
Sure.
Photographs from April 4th versus photographs from when you were at the scene, and incorporating Santana's video. You can look for similarities and differences in those.
Yes.
Okay. Now, with regards to the Watson case, I'm not sure, that's the Ford case that Mr. McCune asked you about.
Right.
Now, isn't it true your testimony actually was not thrown out on appeal? Do you know that?
No, I don't. I tried to get some people to look into it on my behalf, but it didn't go anywhere.
Okay.
So,
All right, well, that may be a legal argument just for the judge. Beg the court's indulgence. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Judge. Just very briefly. So this was your first go-around using Ikena?
yeah, I bought it specifically for this project because I wanted to see if I could go and get any more detail. So I forked over the $10,000, bought it, and here I am.
And Synthize you've used before, but as far as you know, it's not been accepted in any courts, or that you were able to find out in your research?
In my limited research, yes.
And you've been doing photogrammetry, you said, for 10 years. Photogrammetry is could you explain it just a bit more? It's a picture match of some sort?
Yeah, you take a picture, you're taking 3D and turn it into 2D. You're trying to basically reverse that process through whatever means fits the best based on the photographs you have or photograph. So there's different applications you'll take depending on what your raw materials are.
So it's very important then that anything that you put in that photograph is truly representative of what it is you're trying to recreate. Isn't that correct?
Well, it depends at what level of detail you're going after. Like my process, we put silhouettes in. The silhouettes are basically enlargements of frames, and then the background's cut out and they're printed out and they're put on plywood. Are they accurate representations to the half an inch or quarter inch? No, they're not. Okay, so to that respect, no. But this type of measurement, this measurement from Mr. Scott to Mr. Slager, is not the type of measurement you have to get down to the nearest inch on. And we'll maybe talk about that later. So it depends on if you were doing a head height out of somebody going out of a convenience store. That's much more critical in that respect.
But this is not an objective process. It's a subjective process. As you look at this, you decide when you have it lined up correctly. Isn't that right?
Well, anybody using reverse projection photogrammetry, at least doing it any type of manual way, whether you're trying to physically place a camera, there's another technique where you print a transparency out and it's a close range thing, you're doing this. Yeah, there's subjectivity involved in that. But that's one of the reasons why I went out there 3 times, is to see the repeatability of it too.
And so your subjectivity means that you had to make decisions at each point along the way, and then when you finally got where you thought it was good, you said, this is it, correct?
Yes.
And then based on that, you then did an objective thing, which is pull out a measuring tape.
Yes.
So there is not, it is not a stretch to say that your opinion of the correct positions of the silhouettes in the photogrammetry picture and the matching in the photogrammetry picture led to the measurements, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing else, Judge?
Mr. Williams, what areas do you propose to offer opinions? In what areas?
In this
An expert opinion in what areas?
Judge, if I might,
Yes.
since I'm the one asking the
No,
question.
I'm the one asking. You both have had opportunities. Now I am asking questions You can pose questions after I ask the questions.
What I was referring to is with regards to his testimony, I don't know that he knows what he's.
He can say that if he doesn't know.
As far as expert opinions,
Yes.
probably in the methodology I used to do the reverse projection photogrammetry, the methodology and how I created the timeline, fit all the pieces together, whether that rises to the level of expert opinion, but I can't see further than that. Again, I don't know what's going to be asked me per se.
So you believe that you can offer an expert opinion in the methodology that you use to determine what?
Well, one of the tasks I was asked is to determine the approximate distance between Mr. Scott and Mr. Slager at especially the first shot. So the method that we chose to do that is the reverse projection photogrammetry, and that is to reestablish Santana's camera position and then place the silhouettes in there and then take a measurement from there. And then, of course, factor in an error rate.
How many years of experience have you had in measuring distances through the use of reverse engineering?
We've done it several times over the years, probably over the past 10 years we've had need to do that.
And what type of specialized training do you have in using that methodology?
Well, the methodology, and I'm not, I guess, not trying to knock myself, but it's basically trying to physically place his camera where Santana had it placed. It's more of a process in how you accomplish that. There's all different, there's multiple ways of advice to how to accomplish that. We used one that I explained earlier with the transparency, and we built a fixture to hold the camera and to allow us to make minute changes. That's just based on understanding that small changes in the camera are going to affect what you see on the other end. So we tried to take steps to minimize that as much as possible. We did it 3 different times to show that it can be repeated. And we showed movement of the silhouettes during the same camera position to show that it's noticeable on the screen.
Now, it seems as if through your earlier testimony that you disagree with items and evidence as to the placement of various items by SLED and perhaps others. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes, Your Honor.
So you're not basing, you don't propose to base your testimony on anything that's in the record, but on your own investigation.
Yes, which involved determining that both of those references were off.
Now, referring to this Ford v. Watson case, where you were, let me refer to the opinion, I'll ask you a question. In the Watson v. Ford case where you were qualified as an expert in cruise control,
Yes, Your Honor.
and the court, in discussing your testimony, says that you were qualified as a cruise control expert. You testified that you'd worked in the automotive industry as a trainer, consultant, software developer, and writer since the early 80s, and was currently conducting seminars to train automobile technicians who focus on brake systems in vehicles. In cross-examination, you admitted you had no professional experience working on cruise control systems prior to the litigation. Also admitted that you had not conduct any comparisons on the Explorer's cruise control system to any other system, and you acknowledged that you had never taught or published papers on cruise control systems. In the court, in discussing it, says there is no evidence to support the judges qualifying you as an expert on cruise controls because you had no experience, no knowledge, skill, experience, or training or education specifically related to cruise control systems. Rather, it merely shows that you studied Explorer systems just before trial, and basically, otherwise, I think referred to you as sort of being self-taught in the area. Now, we've moved from the Ford cruise control expert that case was reversed based on the judge erroneously admitting you as an expert to this case where you've moved from cruise control to being an expert, and that's my question, an expert in what field?
Well, if I could address Watson a little bit, or?
No.
No, okay.
You've moved from being an expert in cruise control to an expert in
Scene investigation and
scene
recreation.
all right. Scene investigations
And recreation.
and recreation. And tell me about your education, training, and experience in scene investigations. Are you referring to crime scene investigations?
Both, all scenes, industrial accidents, car accidents, crime scenes.
Well, we'll relate it to crime scenes since that's what it's involved here.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, tell me about your education, training, and experience in crime scene investigation.
Well, as I answered earlier, I do not have formal training in that. Mine is experience-based, and it started back in 2009 when I was asked to look at the first shooting case, and it's continued since then.
And what particular expertise in crime scene investigations do you have?
The processes and principles I apply to other scene investigations are basically the same for crime scene in terms of my role in it. My role is to, it's after the fact, I'm not there first on the scene. I'm looking at other people's work who have worked the scene, and I'm asked to put it back together, to make a timeline of it, to give a representation at whatever level of what took place during that incident. But it's an after-the-fact investigation that has other people's work.
Well, first of all, you have no law enforcement experience, do you?
No, I do not, Your Honor.
And you've been admitted into court as a crime scene investigation, and as an expert in crime scene investigations on how many occasions?
The one time in the Combs case.
In which case?
Combs, that was, the designation was a little different, it wasn't
That's
cited.
the Utahville police shooting?
Yes, sir.
And that's the one you said what did you testify concerning in that case? You said your expertise wasn't challenged by anyone, but what did you testify to in that case?
Well, I was cross-examined on my qualifications during that case, and the judge qualified me, but I
I
testified.
mean, what opinion did you render?
The first opinion was that the truck being driven by the victim was a deadly weapon, based on my experience with a different automotive defect and my testing of an exemplar vehicle. And the other was
So your
that,
opinion was automotive related in that regard?
partial, yes.
All right.
And the other was that the two eyewitnesses who testified, I basically went to the scene and documented their positions, the vehicle's positions, and what was in the line of sight.
What did you say about that? What did you testify concerning that?
Basically, that the one witness would have to be looking underneath the truck, through a bush and other obstacles. I showed my work and said that there's the line of sight, there's what's in the path between here, point A and point B. The other one, that
Is that
she,
a factual determination or factual testimony or expert testimony regarding sight line?
I don't know the legal separation there, Your Honor. I gave my opinion on it, said that this is what I saw when I recreated the line of sight for both of these witnesses, and these are the variables involved in witness one or witness two, and that was the extent of it.
And other than that, Utahville case, what other crime scene crime scene testimony have you been allowed to give expert opinion on in?
I gave deposition testimony in the mobile
Not
home.
deposition testimony.
Okay, no trial testimony, Your
Yeah.
Honor.
No trial, no other trial testimony.
No other trial testimony.
And what distinguishes this case from the case where Watson, the Watson case, Ford v. Watson, where you obviously had a lot of experience in the automotive industry, as you've testified to, but not on cruise controls, and that's why that verdict was reversed. Let's see. Yeah, the jury awarded compensatory damages of $15 million, and plus 3 to the estate. $18 million verdict that was reversed because you were allowed to testify in an area where the appellate courts determined you were not qualified to testify. So what distinguishes that case from this case?
I won't go into my defense of Watson. In this case, this is not my first scene investigation, crime scene specific investigation. It's certainly not my first scene investigation. The same principles I apply on my hundreds of non-crime scene investigations do apply here. And this isn't the first one I've done. It is the first one I've testified about. That is fact, other than the Utahville.
Okay, and the other area you say that you're prepared to give expert testimony is in recreation. Is that the same as accident reconstruction or crime scene reconstruction?
Yes, Your Honor.
And tell me about your education, training, and experience in that field.
The education and training is the same answer I gave earlier. There isn't any. I've been piecing together facts and cases since 2003. I've done well over 1,000 timelines at all different levels, some very complex, such as this one, many very complex, more
What
complex.
methodology did you use to recreate? What scientific methodology, technological methodology did you use to, or any other methodology you used to recreate the scene in this case?
Well, you have to link the different medias that are available. We start with, of course, the dash cam. We have the dispatch audio, and we have Santana's video/audio. So the first step is to see if there's events in those that can link them together, because there's no consecutive timeline with all three of them that says, okay, they all happen at this time, so you have to link them back together. So there's, in the Slager dash cam, there's verbal statements made during that are also in the dispatch, so you basically tie those back together. Then if you use the dispatch as your common link, you go to the end where the officer is rendering care for Mr. Scott, and there's another verbal statement that is also in the Santana video, so you link those together. So now you have,
You mean time-wise or?
time-wise, yes. So now you have those three events timed together. Then you look at the other aspects, the scene evidence, the taser log, Scott's phone bill, or not phone bill, phone record, and you see where those fit in. You take into consideration the issues that came up with the taser log not being, the taser wasn't synced for some time, and then the offset that taser came up with, and then.
So you've synced timelines based on events that are times that could be pulled from the vehicle, the taser,
Yes, Your Honor.
et cetera. And did you also include the cell phone?
Yes, Your Honor.
And so is that something that, in what way does that, do you need to be an expert to be able to do that?
It can, I don't want to take anything away from me, but if you have the knowledge of the different softwares that I used, you don't have to be an expert.
Okay, so you're able to sync software to do that?
I use software to basically build, if you saw the file, it's a huge, with a bunch of lines and markers and all this. Yeah, it's my video editing program that allows me to put all these medias in the right place and time.
So you're proficient enough in computer technology that you could use that tool to extract, identify, or sync a timeline out of what's in evidence in this case?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you could do that based on your testimony that you started with a Commodore back in the 80s, and you've figured out how to do it through using computers over the years and using softwares to help you.
Yes, Your Honor. I've spent thousands and thousands of hours in front of a computer doing that, yes.
Go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate your questioning. I'll hand up to the court just you probably have this, but this is the South Carolina jurisprudence article on expert witnesses. I think most of the questions that Mr. McCune has asked go to the weight of the product that Mr. Williams will present to the jury versus its admissibility. I think the court focused on something that we've been struggling with from the very beginning, and this, Mr. Williams, as I believe an expert in these fields, is still not a lawyer. What we don't want to run afoul of is higher courts who frown upon dressing up a lay person's opinion when it's really an expert opinion. I agree with the court. We aren't going to be asking questions like, in your opinion, Mr. Williams, is that a phone in Mr. Scott's hand? In your opinion, Mr. Williams, who threw that taser? Even though we can't see it on the video, you've enhanced it. Who threw the taser? We aren't going to ask those kinds of questions. But the fact of the matter remains that clearly, and you can tell from Mr. Hume's voir dire especially, this witness has knowledge and technical skills that our jury does not have. And that
In what area?
in the area of video enhancement, video stabilization.
I thought you said you weren't going to offer him as an enhancement expert. Video enhancement, or, of course, I hadn't heard him say much of anything about being an expert in video enhancements.
I believe we had a good bit of testimony about
I
that
could have missed it.
before lunch.
If I missed it, I missed it. I heard when
But-
Mr. McCune was questioning him, he said, well, I'm not gonna try to get any enhancement
Oh,
out
no,
of
no,
him.
no, sir. I said analysis. And I do believe there's a difference between performing the task of stabilization and enhancement versus video analysis and being able to tell how video recordings are created, how they're manufactured, how they're, it's just a lot broader, and even Mr. McHugh
So
pointed
you've
out.
had it in a video enhanced by the FBI, and you want this witness to do some more enhancements.
That's right, for different sections. The FBI was initially contacted, I'm not even sure about who, in the initial phases of the investigation. After that, it was my understanding, whether it was a misunderstanding, I don't know, that they weren't going to do any more with regards to the video.
Well, what does he propose to enhance?
Your Honor, he enhances, he's done a whole series of enhancements. We aren't going to offer all of those. For example, where the FBI enhanced the phone in hand as Mr. Scott is running while being shot. Mr. Williams did that same enhancement, and that's another way that I think he's been peer reviewed.
Sure.
If you look at them side by side, they look the same, but we're not going to try to retread that.
It seemed like he did his own peer review through all the questions I heard Mr. McKeon ask.
What I'm saying, Your Honor, is that if you look at the product that the FBI produced with that phone in the hand, and you look at Mr. Williams' product, whether or not it's technically a peer review, you, the jury, anybody else can look at them and see they're very, very similar, and you wouldn't know them apart. We aren't going to re-trot out that testimony about the phone in the hand. There are other segments of the video that he does offer enhancement and stabilization for. For example, when Mr. Scott gets out of the car the first time, and then when he gets out of the car the second time. I think what you also heard Agent Emmel or Mr. Emmel testify to, and I think it's important, is that what he did regarding the stabilization and enhancement was not expert work. His opinion, his only expert opinion that Mr. Emmel offered was with regards to whether or not the videos were authentic. That he wasn't rendering an opinion when he produced this software-generated enhancement, this software-generated stabilization, that wasn't an expert opinion. And we're kind of in that same situation. We're getting, I know the semantics are important, but what this witness has is a skill that the common man doesn't have, who hasn't been using this sort of software over and over. But I'm not going to ask him to a reasonable degree of certainty in the field of video enhancement and stabilization. Is this picture clearer, and does it show more of this, that, or the other? The jury's going to see that. So I don't want us to be caught, again, in no man's land of not having this witness who does have years and years of software writing, development, experience, years of...
I haven't heard him give convince me in any way that he's an expert in the video enhancement, and what's the other? He's an expert with regard to syncing computers, apparently. I mean, I accept that.
Yes, sir.
But to say that he's a forensic expert in the field of
Video stabilization.
video stabilization,
Wow.
I haven't heard him give any expert, he hasn't convinced me that he's an expert. I haven't heard him.
I thought we covered that before lunch, but I'm
Yeah.
happy to go over that.
Well, I mean, none of it was convincing to me then,
Okay.
because he,
Judge, again, I go back to, and maybe we offer him as a lay witness to
Yeah.
tell about video stabilization and enhancement, because as Mr. Emmel testified, these are software packages that anyone can buy and anyone can use. The difference with this witness is he's done it hundreds of times. This isn't his
what did he,
first
I haven't, my job is to make this threshold determination. It could well be that the subject matter that he wants to testify is something that can benefit the jury, because it's an area where some specialized knowledge based on education training may be of benefit to the jury, but the person must be qualified to give an opinion based on all of that, and the opinion has to have the requisite degree of reliability before he's allowed to offer it to the jury. And the cross-examination has really greatly diminished any reliability that the court can place on these opinions that he intends to offer based on his lack of education and lack of training and lack of experience in the particular software that he says that he uses to formulate his opinions, if in fact he uses software. I don't know. Of course, you hadn't offered anything specific in regard to his view of things and the basis for his opinion to try to enhance something or stabilize something with Mr. Scott exited the vehicle. I didn't hear, if you asked him questions along those lines, I missed it.
No, sir. What I thought we were doing at this point was going over his background experience, his qualifications, not proffering the evidence that he was eventually going to testify to. I thought we were doing.
Well, all of that is all that's part of the whole bag here, because you know he's testified that he was thrown to the wolves in Georgetown as an expert in environmental law of some sort. He emerged in the county there. Where was that? Where's that Watson case? Down in 14th Circuit somewhere?
I don't remember, Your Honor.
You don't remember where it was? He was there as an expert in cruise control, and now he's emerging here as a police expert,
I haven't offered
photographic
him as-
expert, a crime scene. I mean, that's general area where we've had many highly qualified people testify, and you know, I can just imagine seeing this case again before the Supreme Court, and they said, "Who's this expert?"
Well, I
You know,
think,
it's,
again, Your Honor, your function is a gatekeeper, and we certainly
oh,
respect
yeah,
that.
Absolutely.
But I also think that formal education is not a requirement, and in fact, 702 talks about that specifically. What the witnesses testified about regarding scenes, and one of the things that I asked, and I think that the court knows, is that a scene is a scene if you're looking to confirm, corroborate, or dispute evidence placement, whether or not it goes the civil route or the criminal route. And he has examined hundreds of scenes, and I think that the testimony that he would offer regarding that would be greatly beneficial to the jury. And, you know, again, I don't believe that we are going to be asking him a question that in the traditional legal sense is an expert opinion. And I believe in the Watson case, I need to take a look at it. In the Watson case, the court held that while he should not have been designated an expert, that his testimony essentially consisted of a description of a system accompanied by models and diagrams of the components.
See, the thing that distinguishes experts from lay witnesses, as you well know, is that they can offer opinions, and that's pretty critical. So if he is qualified as an expert, and you ask them questions that don't solicit expert opinions, then we've misled the jury.
Well, and that's, again, what I don't want to do that, and that's why I'm concerned about, regardless of whether he offers an expert opinion, he clearly has skills that the jury does not have.
He's a very talented person
Right.
in many, many areas, as we can see, and I have no criticism of anyone who is self-taught. We get a lot of auto mechanics and painters and many other people who gain expertise through years of experience. But that same type person typically doesn't move around and become an expert in any area that the court, someone decides they need an expert and have the person study up on it as the court concluded in Watson and become an instant expert.
Right, I agree with that.
And in this case, particularly where his view is critical of, in a sense, of all the evidence in the record, so he's a solo out there offering his own opinions, apparently wanting to offer his own opinions, not based on evidence accepted in the record, but based on his own research in this case. That's the way it appears at this point.
I believe that the foundation he will be.
In fact, I'm amazed that the defense is objecting to his testimony based on what I've heard thus far.
What I believe the foundation that we will lay will show is that, in fact, his timeline in particular is a compendium of evidence that is in the record.
Well,
That's the memo.
and I've concluded that sinking timeline, he's okay. All the other areas, I don't see it. If you want to
Your Honor, I think perhaps at this point, again, I thought that we were just handling we weren't doing a Jones-type hearing earlier. What I would like to do for the court is to have the witness take you through what he did, because I think we're missing each other some on whether or not he is rendering an expert opinion. And it may be that once you see that offer of proof.
Well, you asked him questions, Mr. McCune asked him questions, I asked him questions, and then you started asking him a question. Now you've abandoned asking him, he's still in the witness chair, and started this colloquy with me.
Well, I need to do that, I need to get some things set up for you, if that's all right.
Well, I mean, he has some level of expertise, but not only you must meet the threshold that he qualifies based on education, training experience, and I know he has some experience going out to crime scenes and the things that he said he's done through being hired by various lawyers to do various things. So that part is still questionable to me, but then if he meets that threshold, then whatever opinion he seeks to offer must meet the reliability test based on methodology and et cetera.
And I think that's what he can demonstrate for you in
All right.
walking you through what he did.
All right, well, let me get a quick response from Mr. McCune before we go further.
Thank you, Judge. I believe your analysis is correct, and that's what concerns us in this case. It's just that he's done an awful lot of things, and I know that the solicitor says he's not offering an opinion, but he has a compendium of all these things, and he has subjectively decided where to put these things, and then based on that, says, I measured it out as this far. I think that's an opinion, and I think it's an opinion that calls for expert testimony. Now, if someone else had arranged the figures out there, arranged the material out there, and he came out and measured it, that's within an opinion of fact. But the fact that he has actually manipulated things to a position where then he says, this is what it is, I believe he has then made himself an expert in those areas, and it just concerns the defense because we want the jury to have the best information they can. It's very important to the state, to the court, to our clients, and I don't think that this is a situation where you can do a bootstrap presentation and then offer expert opinions.
All right. Okay. You want to set something up, you said?
Yes, sir, I might be able to do it just from this computer.
All right. We'll be at ease for a few minutes while you do